Guest this evening is part of the Elby leadership from ARC, Alternative Rehabilitation Communities. We're joined by one half today, the former and now retired COO of Alternative Rehabilitation Communities, an organization that focuses in on youth, reentry, reestablishing our young people who may have had brushes with the law, but ensuring that they are better prepared to return as positive additions to society. And I couldn't think of any better two gentlemen to lead such an effort than Dan and Mike Elby, who has done that for well over 40 years. That's well over 4 decades. Not only have they been instrumental in the lives of young people who have had brushes with the law, but I'm one that is sitting here today because of opportunities that they afforded to me when I was a young parent, still in college, and needing to make legal money. They thought it not robbery to allow me to come home every other weekend and get those 24 hours in, back-to-back 12-hour shifts, so I can do my part in my child's life. So I am forever grateful and indebted for you and Dan always looking out for me and those like me who wanted to come back and give back at an early age. So without any further ado, I'd like to jump right into conversation with you, Coach L. You'll hear me say Coach L, Mike Elby, all that, but it's basically going to be Coach L, who we, what we affectionately call him. So if you can talk a little bit about how you got involved, in the family business, and how you have you established that longevity through service and what kept you going for so long?
Well, first, Karl, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to share a little bit about ARC. And like you said, it was a journey for me that went 43 years, and we're still running. So we're close to 48 years in business in the Harrisburg community. But I was a student at Rutgers College, graduated in 1974, and I was working at the New Street Alternative Education School, and also part-time work at IBM. And my brother Daniel just came back from Michigan State, and in our talking, he was talking about putting together a program for dealing with juvenile delinquents. And our first office was on upstairs, over top of my father's bar. And we put together a program. Then we purchased a property on Woodlawn Street in Harrisburg. And for 5 years, we were in the zoning board trying to get approved to be able to establish and run this program. So while we were doing that, the mayor at that time was Tim Doutrick. We had a senator by the name of George Geekus, and they were vehemently against us putting this program together. And for 5 years, the talk was that this program would deteriorate the value of the properties around. It talked about, like our kids would run away, steal cars, break into houses, and just be an eyesore in this community. It was middle class, predominantly white. And for 5 years, we were in the zoning hearing. And a gentleman by the name of Lorenzo Rowling, God bless his soul, Lorenzo cast the deciding vote to allow us to open up our business. And the funny thing about that, after that 5 years of being in limbo, property values went up. No cars was ever stolen. No homes were ever broken into. And we were able to start our journey, which is still continuing to work with young people. And I can honestly say that this is probably the best job I've ever had in my life, the best experience I've had in my life. So I'm just honored to be a part of such an outstanding organization.
Definitely. So when you talk a little bit about perception of young people, I can share a couple of my stories by working there, but from as we say the C-suite level, talk about and I say that in jest because honestly, I mean you and Dan were boots on the ground. If something went down at 2 in the morning, they wasn't happy when you showed up, but you showed up. You know, we and the directors of those houses, if need be, if you guys had to be called and you showed up, nobody's really happy, but you were available if it was necessary. Talk about what it meant to continue to have that relationship with not only the kids and community, but your family, because this is truly a family business, and how you were able to lead an organization that, in essence, was a place for, if you would, throwaway kids in society would say, but you were able to, as your titles dictates in states, rehabilitate. Talk about that.
Well, the whole family. I'll start with my mother and my father. You know, they were bought in from the beginning. Like I said, our first office was over top of my father's bar, and my mother had a lot of experience dealing with young people. You know, being the first African American um, parent down at the Milton Hershey School, and so with that, my father also was into the food business, maitre d' in a lot of the hotels around this area, and he put together a culinary arts program for us that we would take kids down to the St. Moritz and run a whole dinner and have them cook it, talk about it, serve it, and then from there we had a relationship with the Hilton Hotel, where the program that was being run down at the Hack for their culinary arts program, where kids were leaving Hack and going down to Brico, we were able to tie into that. We were getting our kids trained well in the culinary arts field. And then, like child labor law stepped in and said, well, they had to be paid to do that. So that program was abandoned. But our whole thing was, and coming from my mother, more importantly, was that her thing was, help all the kids you can, all the ways you can, and for as long as you can. And saying that, like through her eyes, there was never a bad kid. There were kids that really need help. And a lot of times, just trying to build relationship with kids that have been hurt is a challenge, because first thing they want to do is push you away because, like they don't have good relationships with adults. So we had to roll up our sleeves, build relationships. You always respect them, and they had to earn trust. But, our first group of kids, came out of the Camp Hill prisons. Back in the day, there wasn't a lot of juvenile detention, so kids were coming right out of prison. And we were able to challenge them and help them grow.
Okay. You talk a little bit about some of you. I know you had a lot over the 4 decades, but are there several that success stories, we'll say, that maybe the young man or young lady came in and he was like, oh God. And then it turned out by the end of, their treatment period with you all, you were like, wow. And then that aha moment when they returned to you again as young adults doing positive things in the community, back in their communities or here in Harrisburg, what's that feeling like, that aha moment?
That's the best feeling in the world, because like in dealing with kids, you always have to believe in them, because a lot of times they haven't had good relationships with adults. Mm-hmm. And we're working with kids that just life's not fair, and you take someone who come to you that had a second grade reading level, and by the time they leave you, they have a GED. Then we've had a lot of kids come back and work with us, and been able to establish their life and their family. You'll get calls saying, hey, I treat my kids like you guys treated me. I taught my kids what you taught me. And it's not a better feeling to see kids that, people didn't think much of them, But when you challenge them and you have expectations, it all starts about expectations. If I have expectations that you're going to do well, I'm going to challenge you that way. If I don't have expectations, then you're not going to do anything, and we're not going to have any successes. I know, like back in the day when I would go into interview some of these kids, the first thing I wanted to know what was their academics like. I mean, can they read? Can they write? And you give them a newspaper, ask them to read it, and right there you'll find out what you're dealing with. Kid that can't read, you say, okay, well, you know what? That's okay right now, but by the time we get down the road, you're going to be able to read, you're going to be able to write. So the challenge is that you can't come in here and play. We have a short time to get a lot of work done. But little things like that will go a long way. You unmask them. The kids been hurt and angry, but you can't be mad at me because I didn't raise you, but I can help you. So expectations is everything.
Definitely. Talking about, so a lot of people who may not be familiar, when we talk about adjudicated youth, it's always, one of those things where the young people are, lock them up, throw away the key. They may, in fact, have been sent to ARC, but as your name dictates, the rehabilitation part, you all take that really seriously. And it's never more evident than what you just highlighted with regards to education. Some people may not know that there are various programs embedded within ARC beyond just detainment of young people. So can you talk a little bit about the programming piece, like the education and the groups and the social emotional supports and things?
Yeah. From an educational standpoint, we didn't send our kids to public schools. We did in-house education, and with that in-house education, every child had a syllabus where they would have to work on it on their own, and with the teachers' help, the counselors' help. But like one thing that we always found out that kids want to be helped, kids want to be taught. And like I'm saying, you get somebody who had a second grade education, and the next thing they get turned on to learning, and they off the chart. And that's because what you expect is what you're going to get. And a lot of these kids just wanted somebody to believe in them so they could show you what they're capable of doing. And if you don't challenge them, if you don't have expectations, you're not going to get anything out of that.
Definitely. What I like to do now is say we have the number rolling across the screen. We are going to take phone calls at 717-903-8760. 717-903-8760. We are now accepting phone calls as we continue this conversation. Coach L, you honed in on that education piece, which is of uttermost importance as we know. But if you could talk a little bit about what it means if you reflect on what it means to you, what it meant then, what it means now, and hopefully in the future as you all continue, how ARC's reputation is perceived as that institution where, yes, young people go to, but they come out differently in a way like never before. It's also a place for young people, yes, but talk a little bit about what it means to be a career pathway for those young people like myself who come back looking for an opportunity, looking for a gateway, looking for a profession where we can not only be successful, but be helpful to our communities.
The talent that's in Harrisburg is unbelievable. And I know when back in the 70s, when we first opened up, you had a big migration from people coming up from the South to work in the school district. And there was a lot of kids coming back to Harrisburg that couldn't get jobs in the city. And a lot of those, we just sucked them up. And they started off county trainee, and a lot of them end up running the programs. So we had a vehicle that was very, very conducive to young, I'm gonna say African Americans coming in and learning what we do, and then gets blown up. And that's the biggest, when you talk about success, it's all about getting the right people that care about our young people, that aren't afraid to challenge them. And with that, they grow like weeds. we've been real fortunate to be able to get some of the best that Harrisburg has to offer as far as working with our young people.
Definitely. Like I said, what we will do is we'll begin to take phone calls here at 717-903-8760. We cannot thank you enough for sticking with us. Hopefully you'll still be here on the other side of this commercial. Again, here at Music Man Multimedia Studios, a seat at the table, hosted by yours truly, with special guest today, former, now retired COO of alternative rehabilitation communities, none other than Coach L, Mike Elby. Again, welcome back. Thank you for staying with us here this evening. Coming live from Music Man Multimedia Studios, here where we host a seat at the table. Again, I'm joined today, this evening, by recently retired, going on 3 years, embarking upon 3 years of retirement, Coach L, Mike Elby, former COO at Alternative Rehabilitation Communities. Before we went to commercial break, we were having a conversation about the importance of education and what you all were doing inside with your program and with regards to ARC. And we kept talking about second grade reading levels, so forth and so on. What we highlighted during our commercial break was it's not always the kids that are less than proficient with regards to reading in their academics. But there's also the other side, which is they're high performing students, young people that you have to deal with And you all did a great job of having everyone in one setting, really executing what's called differentiated classroom instruction. As a former educator, I know how difficult that could be when you have various learning styles, not only styles, but learning abilities embedded in one setting. So could you talk a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities that presented for your teachers, your education department embedded within in ARC?
Absolutely. With the education, when we talked about the second grade level, that would be the low end. Then you go all the way up to kids that are working close to a college level work. And you know, for the young folks that had challenges, if the books were too slow, we would tape them so kids wouldn't look at them and just start to beat them up on, well, you can't read. So they never knew, no one actually knew what they were working on.
Great.
You know what I mean? So that way we can just challenge folk and challenge them. The students that were working on a high end, a lot of them, when they left, they would go to community college. I mean, we always try to start from community college as opposed to jumping right into a 4-year, because they might get a little lost in that.
Right, right.
So you do that junior college, community college, and things will go well. But our teachers were phenomenal. I mean, we had a lot of retired teachers from Harrisburg High. The two that come to mind most was John West Gumby, and Mr. John Grove. Both of these men were principals at John Harris. And John Gumby was fluent in Spanish, so he worked down at our Latino program. He and Mr. Grove, and the work that they did with the young folk down there, that English was a second language, was phenomenal. Phenomenal.
So listen to what we're saying here. There's young people that oftentimes were given up on and sent off into placement, and here they were able to be directed in a way where education was of uttermost importance, even if it wasn't when they arrived. By the time they left, it was a clear understanding of one of the tools you will definitely leave here with, aside from social interaction, skills, respect, so forth and so on, was an appreciation for where education can take you. So this speaks volumes to not only our young people, but to our communities as a whole, with regards to how we need to ensure that we are thriving in education. I'm not saying you have to be superstars, but you have to at least realize the importance. If a community, if a placement facility, which is oftentimes given a stigma of bad, throwaway, poor, 5 years in the zoning board, we don't want this in our community.
Yes.
And in essence, property value go up because of what you're doing over there and helping the young people. And I know working there, it wasn't only the young people and what they did inside, but the community service aspect, dealing with the Special Olympics, going out, for example, the snow, going out and shoveling the neighbors out, helping with the car. So, there was value add, not only to the young people, but to the communities that some may have perceived as, this is going to bring us down. In essence, you all brought a program in a fashion of a community to a community that lifted it up.
We had a gentleman that was a lawyer that lived right behind us. And the relationship there got so good that when he would go away, he would want our kids to come over, cut grass, and do some things. Kind of made me nervous first. I hope you're trying to set us up, right? But never an incident. And this cat was really, really, helpful in helping our kids. And the good thing about all this, kids know when something's good is happening to them. And a lot of times our kids were our biggest salespeople. They would tell probation, hey, send my cousin, send my brother, send my friend here, because these folks are really helping me. And that was always good to feel. It was a good feeling when someone said, hey, we're getting help here.
So as I said, the Elby family is large, and I was talking about the Harrisburg area, but Coach L's getting shout outs from Alabama, from Miss Val Mims. Shout out, of course, Ant shouting out. He's talking about Feelings Group. Yeah. If we can hone in on that, because I think great point, Ant. The Feelings Group piece. There's various structured activities and groups that are inside of the curriculum of ARC throughout the day, the comprehensive day. If you can hone in on that feelings group piece.
Well, feelings group was something was held on a weekly basis. It was an hour long, and feelings are neither right or wrong. And just like I said, a lot of kids would come in extremely angry and hurt, and our feelings meeting was a vehicle in which we would allow them to express themselves and challenge themselves, and really look at themselves, because when someone's coming in angry and want to put it on you or not take accountability for anything that they've done, it's not going to get better. But our feelings meeting was huge in allowing and teaching kids how to express themselves.
Definitely. One of the things that we talk about a lot this day and age is the school to prison pipeline. We talk about disproportionate minority contact. And I know ARC is heavily involved with the statewide disproportionate minority contact committee. I served on that, with Dan, during my time when I was helping out. When I was charged with the honor and responsibility of being the White House contact for my brother's keeper. Dan and I developed an even stronger relationship by working on the statewide committee for disproportionate minority contact. You talk about how ARC played and continues to play a significant role in diversionary programs and ensuring that eventually we eradicate that school to prison pipeline through addressing research-based disproportionate minority contact.
Dan ran the program for probably 20 years. And I think he just recently stepped down, and the bottom line to really fight the system, to try to keep our kids out of the system was huge. And I know when we opened up, you didn't see a lot of 17-year-old African-American males in the juvenile system. Most of them are, in prison.
Right.
And our fight and our challenge was, we always want to have, 60% African Americans in our program, because, we don't want them going to jail.
Right.
They need to be somewhere where they can get help and be challenged and learn how to live, productive lives.
Definitely. Ms. Faith Colden called in and beat me to a question. Because not only, as she's alluding to, was there that clear understanding of the social skills and education, but the spirituality and the faith-based side, because there's a such thing as church as well, that you definitely had them interacting with those not forced on them, but those who chose, to stay in touch with their spirituality.
Yeah, those who wanted to be a part of that faith base was fine. We had Diane Befford, renowned singer, and Diane took a group of our kids, and we had what we call an ARC choir that was phenomenal. Some of the talent that came through that was just unbelievable. And a lot of kids joined church, learned about the Lord, and stayed strong in their faith throughout the rest of their life.
That's right. That's right. I believe it was Miss Veronica Scales that talked about how she actually adopted someone through that pathway of so she said, yes, I adopted a godson by ARC's participation at Bethel AME.
Yeah.
So shout out to Bethel. I guess you shouldn't say shout out to churches, huh? God bless Bethel for continuing to accept those young people who still at their core understood not only who they were, but whose they were. And that's definitely important. But where we are now in society, a lot of times we always want to highlight a reoccurring theme of then, now, and next. But with that, we talk about living in two Americas.
Oh yeah.
We see clearly every day, whether those two Americas are race-based or gender-based, there's no doubt that we are living in two Americas. How did you and continue to talk to young people about the importance of understanding and respecting the law, and being in the system that at times is going to not be as just to you.
Like I was talking to you earlier about expectations, and expectations in dealing with kids is everything, because some kids, I mean, all their life, all they saw was criminal activity. I remember talking to a young boy, and it's four staff people. We're sitting there talking, and he wanted to challenge all of us. We know y'all selling drugs because everybody I know sells drugs. I said, what are you talking about? You talking about his grandpa, his uncle, his dad, his brother, and to try to break that down to show kids that this is not the way to live. I mean, back then they had the Scared Straight program,
right,
where kids where they would be able to see what their actions could bring them, and just trying to have someone start to believe in themselves and see something other than that criminal mentality has always been a challenge, and some kids, it's sad because they could be in placement, but they were the breadwinners at their home. Yeah. There was no dad, so they selling drugs. Mom's turning their head because the money's coming in, and that's a hard thing to try to break when someone's out here making $1,000 a week, and you got to tell them, hey, you can't do that. You're going to jail. Well, I'm okay with that, and that was bred from families, and one of the things we started doing, you want to find out where the kids are coming from. And you find out where they're coming from. We had a thing what we call it was community visits. Mm-hmm. So we take the kids home and look at the situation and see what they're dealing with. I mean, see if this is something that they can go back to, or is this something that they have to move on? And a lot of times, by the time kids get out of the program, they would outgrow that home situation, right, and knowing this wasn't the best place for me to go. Right. But we never said you can't go. But, when they start getting well, a lot of times they're in better shape than mom and dad.
Right, right. And that's, the level of expectation. And this is a recurring theme. Ms. Veronica Scales, again, my mother always says this about, especially for young ladies. There's nothing for these young people to do that may be struggling in the community, or no help for these young people that may be struggling, and you can see that they're struggling in these communities, in our communities. But unless they had a brush with the law at that point, which is too late in our opinion, then there's help. There's nothing out here to help a young woman, a young lady, until she gets pregnant. So what about what's that gap? Based on your expertise, what do you think that gap filler? How do we fill that void between struggling and not quite, being placed, but knowing that if XYZ doesn't happen real soon, placement is on the horizon?
When you have kids that are involved in things in the community, mm-hmm, boys club, girls club, the Y's, and hopefully then teachers can see kids that are really struggling, and people try to get a plan to try to slow them down, right, to talk to them. That's why we need a lot more mentors out there, because like you said, the lucky kids get caught and come to a place like ARC where they can start to learn what values look like.
Right.
And those that don't, I mean, they still get the bumps and bruises of that lifestyle.
Yeah. And those are the lucky ones.
Yeah.
Because bumps and bruises back then are now turning into bullets. Bullets and burials. So, yeah, go ahead.
I remember having a conversation with a young man, and he was 14 years old. And we're just talking about the gun violence thing. And his thing was that, you know what, I'm not going to make it to 21 anyway, because either I'm going to kill somebody or somebody's going to kill me. And that just went right through me.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And that is talking about things you honed in on earlier, talking about trust, understanding, cultural competence, teachers, those adults. I used to when I was in the classroom, I would always tell, teachers, black, white, male, female, whoever, you got to be careful with your words that you're using with these young people, because when you're telling a young person, even though socially and based on society, what they're doing is wrong, what you're really saying to them is your family, your loved ones are wrong, because they're modeling a lot of times the behaviors that they've seen from people that they love, trust, and respect, and have not harmed them. And now you need, from the other side, to create a safe place where the classroom and the school setting showcases that you do value them for who they are, starting where they are, helping them grow, not excusing misbehaviors, not excusing, temper tantrum or whatever it might be, but talk a little bit about that delicate balance between having that empathy and compassion, yet structure.
When you talk about going up against a family, because the values they bring to you come from the family,
right?
And you know that, and you don't want to put the family down, but you want to just start to educate the young people to see that there's a better way. Right. Because just like I said, when someone sees their grandpa, their dad, their uncle, their brother selling drugs, they think this is what everybody does. Right. And you have to really, it comes down to accountability and expectations, because we can't fall back on expectations. If you want kids to grow, you have to set expectations. You have to hold them accountable. You don't have to be nasty and all that, but this is meaningful discussion about, hey man, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're gonna keep getting what you get. And you want to introduce, we have treatment plans where kids are working on the goals that they need to work on. Everybody's situation is not the same. You can deal with abandonment, you can deal with hurt, you can deal with anger, and a lot of times when kids come to the door, I mean, that's their MO. Everyone's coming with anger. Right. Some people feel abandonment, and you just want to challenge that, because, you don't want to attack the family. Just like I said earlier, when these kids start to get it, they get better than the family.
And that expectation, is huge. One of the things, and I'll share, is when I work, and I know I was supposed to, but I didn't read their files. Mm-hmm. I didn't read their files when they got there the first 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And this is when I was actually home, not just on the weekends. I didn't read their files because I wanted to learn the person. And I could see, based on, what was going on in their interaction, pretty much the type of kid that they were. Of course, you get the honeymoon period where they're going to do everything right. Yeah. That piece where, because in their mind, I could get out early now, but it ain't happening. But the reason why I did that was eventually it would be a one-on-one or a group setting, right, in which they're trying to showcase, I'm here and I did everything under the sun to be here and I'm the baddest thing in here. But when you go back and you look, here's a young man in particular. I was oftentimes, young men at Woodlawn and Berry Hill, that had perfect attendance from K through 5, 5th grade, was on the honor roll. And in 6th grade, 7th grade, there was a separation, or there was a death in the family. There was a traumatic experience. There was some trauma. And then in 8th grade, he started trying to sell some weed, or trying to play with a gun, or trying to, whatever it was, following the wrong crowd. And what I would oftentimes say is I would let them get their thing off during the group. But then when they went up for showers in groups, I would say, hey, let me get you for a minute. Send Coach L back downstairs for a second. Mm-hmm. And I would say, Coach L, I heard you talk about how you ain't got no choice but to go back into the game and this, that, and the other. And I would sit him down. I would say to him, look, I see where you had perfect attendance. You was on the honor roll up into the 8th grade. You were doing the right thing. Yeah. Evidently, what you did in the end of the 8th grade year, into 9th grade year, you weren't good at for a year and a half. You have this body of work that you were good at. Who's to say you have to go back to that year and a half as opposed to that full body of work that you, in that resume, you really built? And that would be a light bulb, for a lot of times, even if for that moment.
When I was talking to you earlier about community visits, going back to see where the kids come from,
Mm-hmm.
we had a young man who was in a program, and for a whole year, he didn't have a visitor. Mom, nobody from the family ever came to see him. And within that year's time, he was eligible to go home on community passes.
Mm-hmm.
Never, I mean, every time there was time to go home for community visits, he would act up. But what was happening there was he was a product of a date rape.
Okay.
And the mom just didn't want nothing to do with it. Okay. But that just messed us up. We said, you know what? We'll never allow a kid to go through this again where there's no contact with family.
Right.
And that's when we started to do the family community visits.
Gotcha.
So we see what's going on with these kids.
Right.
And life's not fair. Right. Sometimes say, why they act like that? Well, you don't know what they've been through.
Right. And then, so one of the things that you always talk about, and you've talked about accountability, and you've talked about making sure that there's expectations, but then there's a structure piece and discipline. And you, as we've obviously said, I didn't meet you before through ARC. Yeah. I met you as a coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk a bit about how coaching in that environment offered structure. Those young people that got involved with sports, how important sports is as a student athlete, which you're one of, had the experience yourself, but how that discipline transcends into everyday life and social skills and interactions.
The best thing a young person can go through is being on some type of team, basketball, baseball, track, whatever it is, because again, we're talking about accountability. As a coach, you want the kid that you can count on. And if it's not the best athlete that you can't count on, then you gotta move away from him.
Right.
The ones that you can count on are the ones that's going to grow and develop. And a lot of times, just like coaching football and coaching these young kids, you're coaching them up. We put a basketball program together. We put a cycling program together. We did weightlifting with these kids. And when these kids start getting involved in that and seeing that they can do things and do things well, it just took their whole self-esteem sky high. One of our facilities, was a sex offender program. And when we would have our Olympic days, they weren't some of the best athletes. And sometimes the staff didn't put the time in to really train them. So, I told them, I said, I'm going to take these kids, I'm going to start teaching them how to ride bikes. And I really spent a lot of time with this particular program here and really getting these guys to riding good. So when we would hook up with the other programs, these guys was wearing wearing them out, right? And they looked at these guys like, man, these guys are professional. But you know what? And that's the whole thing, like when you put the time in and you challenge folks, kids will grow.
Right.
And these kids' self-esteem went out the window because they felt that good about being able to accomplish something.
And at that point, thanks for calling in Tamika Hatcher. She talks about, again, which, we continue to highlight, that we have to start ensuring that we're instilling in our young people that jail, prison is not an option. It's not a rite of passage. It's not something that we need to put a feather in our cap to prove our man or womanhood, especially in our communities. Is that I'll just leave it at that for that one. When we go back to understanding young people in the community and their needs, wants, and desires, a lot of times those situations lead us down the path of saying, here's what this kid is capable of. Here is where I want them to be. And we're at a point now, I think, in our communities, in society as a whole, where we have to give realistic conversation and respect, is reciprocated for our young people that are coming to the table to say, I know you experience X, Y, Z, but these are the things that I'm experiencing, and they are not as blatant as the the Klan, showing up, burning crosses.
Right, right.
There are more intricate details. There's more sophistication nowadays that we need to be mindful of keeping our kids not only aware of, but ensuring, we had a conversation earlier, ensuring that our young people have enough tools in their tool bag and experience in regards to when it's time to use them to be successful in life. I want to start to wind down before we go into the next commercial. We're talking about the young people then and the young people now, and the parallel that you see with young people, needs, wants, desires, and how art can continue to be helpful in growing our young people that are coming through today's society's trials and tribulations.
Now, we put a gun violence program together, because back early on, 30 years ago, that wasn't a problem. Now it's a huge problem,
right?
And when we put the gun violence program together, you had kids look at, what it meant to shoot somebody, what it meant to kill somebody, how that impacted, their family, the person that was shot's family, had them write letters from prison. You know what I mean? Just to look at that, because for some reason, kids can get a gun just like they can go buy a soda. And like I said, they will shoot and not understand the finality of what happens when you pull a trigger.
Right.
So I just think right now times are a lot more dangerous than they were before. And all this still goes back to family.
Right.
Now I could see myself at 16 bringing a gun in the house and what would happen to me. People aren't get checked like that no more.
Right.
And that's the scary thing. There's a lot of hurt people, and for whatever reasons, they can get their hand on a gun, and you got all this madness going on.
And we know hurt people hurt people.
Hurt people.
See, I knew it was going to be one of them. And of course, I know I'm your favorite player of all time.
Absolutely.
Hands down. But of course, the control room hate comes in late and early. So they flash Earth up there.
Yeah.
So Kendrick Lewis calls in. He wants to be heard. Shout out to Big Earth, my man. Earth's juke joint. But he makes a great point. Of course, as we all knew, you weren't only a coach, but in the coaching field, when you take on that role seriously, you're an uncle coach. And you and many others, Kennard, I'm getting in trouble because Purdy and just everybody, Coach Mo and Coach Yeager and everybody. I'm naming names. I'm being in trouble. Dez, Mangus, and you all were beyond just X's and O's. Kennard let me drive his BMW when he would go to Woody's workout.
Yeah.
He would just say, "Don't go in the Hall Manor." And to this day, at 48, I never took it in the Hall Manor. I had all my boys come and meet me at Sycamore Street, 17th Sycamore, to see how I was driving it. But the seriousness of you talked about being a mentor. You talked about making sure that there was high expectations and values and accountability. And you all didn't need us to come to art. You came to us and volunteered oftentimes. Well, whatever the pay was back then, it was like volunteer anyway, right, for gas money.
Volunteer.
Voluntold at some point, but you all stuck with it. And I'm saying from all the guys as the favorite, that we appreciate you. And you all that were there, we love you. And we were better men today, the Sherman Cunninghams and Cams of the world, Coach Chiz, of course. We were all the better for it. And we lost good brother, Tracy Ellis.
Oh, yeah.
This past week. So God rest his soul, Sylvester Wilson, our guy. Coach Jerry Waters, he's telling me, Karl, you have the right man at the table tonight. He has changed young children's lives, his entire professional life. His mother, God rest her soul, provided a roadmap for him to follow.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
What does that mean coming from Coach Waters?
Well, Jerry,
wow.
that means a whole lot coming from Jerry, because Jerry, like you said, you're my favorite. My mother and Jerry were their favorite. Jerry was my mother's favorite, and you know, it's just good to have people like when you talk about the coaches. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't about pay. Right. You know, I remember having a conversation with then Dr. Poteet, and we were just talking about, you know, the commitment. And I let him know I'm doing this because I love it. Because when I look at all the hours I put in and what you giving me, it comes out to be like 16 cents an hour. But I'm okay if you didn't give me anything because you know, there's a lot of kids that we can help. That's right. You know, we've been there and done that. Right. And we had role models like you, like you. You know what I mean? And so the foundation was laying. This is what we needed to do. Yeah. You know?
Shout out to Mr. Gus Finley.
Yes, sir.
I remember making the crucial mistake of talking about Harrisburg High football out back. He ate me up until Steve Finley told me I could talk back to him, which I did.
Well, you know, when you
when
you talk about Gus Finley, there was also Sam Mundy, my brother Melvin, Sterling White. That's right. We had Bill Owens up in Carlisle. I mean, we had an older group that was also like when these kids looked at them, they saw grandpa and strong men that they weren't used to seeing. Right. You know what I mean? So as an ARC family, we were blessed with having guys like that were done with their careers and wanted to give back. You know.
Yes, definitely. That's huge. Yeah. That football thing, unlike these young whippersnappers today who practice once, maybe twice, you know, pads, no pads. We did 3-a-days for 2 weeks back in the day. And
3-a-days.
It didn't dawn on me until maybe 5 years ago. A lot of y'all didn't work for the school district, but you were coaches. Yeah. Which meant you were taking your vacation time away from your family to be with us during 2-a-days, 3-a-days, you know, for 2 weeks. Yeah. God rest Mr. Kenneth Summerford's soul. Him, you know, taking us up to Penn State football camps, you know, things like that. And just talking about what you all meant to us and having those moments of reflection gives us full steam ahead capabilities and power to serve as we continue to matriculate through our older years as we embark upon 50, although all you all are still 45.
Yeah, right. Okay. You know, but when we look back, and I look back, and I'm sure I would be speaking for Coach K, Coach Mo, and all the guys. We saw a lot of, and you guys also. So, you know, coming to practice for whatever they was paying us was well worth it because we had a group of guys that we know were going to be special. And I'm sitting there looking at you as good as they come, you know, and it was easy to want to be coaching guys that really wanted to get something out of this whole experience.
Shout out, God rest his soul, Kevin Mitchell, Robert Tate, David Shepard, Will Brown, George Brown, you know, so Jay Hall, you know, it's still in the crazy part, Jay Hall's coaching my son now. You know, how about that? You know, so we're going to go to a commercial break. On the other side of this, we're going to wrap it up. I can't thank my guests enough for thinking it not robbery to come inside and join us here today, representing the entire ARC family, especially Mr. Dan Elby. I'm here with the recently retired, as he goes on 3 years, as CEO of ARC, Alternative Rehabilitation Communities, my coach, Mike Elby.
Falling for you, angel from heaven. When I saw you, you make me feel like falling for you, angel from heaven. When I saw you.
All right, welcome back again. We can't thank you enough for joining us here every Monday and Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. here at Music Man Multimedia Studios for the podcast, A Seat at the Table, hosted by yours truly, Karl Singleton, Again, tonight's special guest was recently retired COO of Alternative Rehabilitation Communities, ARC, Mr. Coach Elby. I want to give you the last word here on your side with regards to where we are today. Closing remarks. What do you think your mother and father would say to you and Dan today as you move forward, remaining unified, uplifting the family, and little known secret that we all know that there's certain thing that the Elby employees can do inside ARC that other people can't do. Not that favoritism, just favor. But we all clearly understand the importance, and you guys showcase the commitment to family, community, and ensuring that professionalism is at the top of everything. So
the good thing about when you asked about my mother and my father, I mean, they had a clear, up close look at what we were doing. So and mom and dad are always happy when they see their kids doing well.
Right.
And a lot of that came from the things we learned at home. The commitment to doing the best you can, help all the people you can in all the ways you can. And the cool thing about my mother, I mean, my mom, if you know her, she was a big recruiter for us. She went down to Hallman and got Miss Jackie Mundy to be a cook. She had my Aunt Joan Smallwood, who's Garth and Kurt's mother. Yeah. She was cooking for us. And then my Aunt Dandy, Eunice was cooking for us. And one thing about when you talk about food and kids, and the kids couldn't wait to sit at a table to get a good meal, and through that mealtime, we had goal focus kids would be talking about things that are going on. But yeah, I'm thankful that I had the parents that I had that pushed us and challenged us to do what we needed to do and accept anything less than our best. So I'm thankful and grateful for that. And then lastly, I would say to anyone that's really looking for a career and work with young people, I would say look into ARC. Our office is up on 2743 North Front Street. And we always need strong people that want to make a difference in our young people's lives.
Definitely. I can't thank you enough for joining us. But I think I just heard, though, you named 3 great cooks. So the kids really weren't getting in trouble. They were just looking for a great meal. That's why they were showing up to ARC.
That's one thing. The kids wouldn't run away when he was eating good. Yeah, absolutely.
Clearly. Yeah. So I'll end with this. Again, thank you all for joining us on Mondays and Thursdays, beginning at 6 p.m. with our special guests who we see as having direct impact with our communities throughout the Harrisburg region and beyond. You heard it here firsthand today. Nothing pre-scripted, nothing just from the heart in terms of having a service, providing a service that is needed in our communities. This is a platform where we will continue to bring people who are actually doing the work, understands the work that needs to be done, and committed to ensuring that we see it through. I'll end with this. We highlighted today in this conversation several areas: accountability, to respect, but expectations was at the top of the list, I would say. The story goes like this. There was once a frustrated teacher, and he one day went to the principal's office at the end of the school year to submit his resignation. And while approaching the principal's office, he noticed the principal's door was open, so he went on in. And as he reached over to lay down his letter of resignation, he noticed the principal's book was open. So he took a quick peek, and he noticed that it was next year's class that he was going to be assigned. And he had been assigned for years kids whose IQ, some may say, weren't as high. The IQs that indicated that a kid may be more challenging than others. And he's just, was tired. But when he looked over, he noticed that this next year coming, he had high IQ caliber kids. So all throughout that summer, he prepared different lesson plans. He went out and got additional professional development, so forth and so on. Started that school year, took off like a light. Kids looked the same, but something was different. Midway through, the principal called him in and was like, "You're doing a great job." End of the year, what do you know? He's teacher of the year. And so as he's up giving his, acceptance speech for teacher of the year, he has a confession to make. And he says, last year around this time, I was going to submit my letter of resignation because I had it up to here with these kids. He said, but I must admit, when I was going into your office to turn in my letter of resignation, I peeked in on your desk and I noticed you were giving me the accelerated kids, the high performing kids. And so I did things a little different. And I think we're all the better for it. And so the principal said, after the meeting or after the ceremony, you mentioned something about my desk and room assignments for the upcoming year. And he said, I really don't do that until August. And that was in June. He said, well, no, I saw it right there. He said, oh no, I was making their locker number assignments. So the lesson in there is it was the same kids. The teacher's expectations had changed.
That's it.
Again, thank you for joining us here at A Seat at the Table with yours truly, Karl Singleton, special guest, Mr. Michael Elby. Thank you.